I chose United States because there are lots of international students coming from everywhere. So I think United States is the best country for that.
Is the United States still the ultimate destination for college or graduate school? American schools are increasing their efforts to welcome international students, but cost and climate, as in political climate, have some parents thinking twice about sending their kids to top American schools. Hello and welcome to Plugged In. I'm Jim Malone, filling in this week for Greta Van Susteren. On today's show, coming to America to study, a snapshot of international students in the United States. The U.S. remains the top destination for overseas students, but are American colleges and universities losing their edge? We'll hear from international students and a college administrator, as well as VOA reporters about the rising costs of an American education, stiffer competition from abroad, and the challenges facing students wishing to study here. As always, we are live on Facebook at Voice of America, and we love to hear your comments and questions. The U.S. is still the destination of choice for international students. In fact, more than 1 million students from around the world choose to study in the United States each year, more than double the next most popular country. Nearly half of the overseas students who come to the U.S. to study are from China and India. South Korea is a distant third with about 55,000 students, followed by Saudi Arabia, Canada, and Vietnam. While enrollments by overseas students rose slightly again this year, experts say the pace of international applications is slowing, and some students are looking elsewhere to pursue a college education. For more on what's happening with international student enrollments in the U.S., here's VOA's education editor, Kathleen Struck.
The U.S. remains the top destination in the world, hosting more than 1 million college students. That's twice as many students as Britain, which ranks second. Education experts say after 10 years on the rise, applications are now dropping because of the high price of tuition and the current political climate.
I don't know if you're aware, but the United States has consistently attracted about a quarter of the international students globally. That's pretty amazing.
But those numbers are declining, according to the latest annual report from the Institute of International Education in Washington.
There's a slower rate of students coming into the U.S. There was a sharp decline of over 6%. And so this is an indication of several factors.
Experts attribute the drop not just to cost and politics, but also to anxiety over immigration, trouble getting visas, and student safety. Some students say they feel unwelcome in the U.S., something other countries are capitalizing on, including Canada, China, Australia, New Zealand, and Europe.
For me personally, I had to wait 10 months to get my visa. They accept your visa or reject it, or they tell you oh, wait.
Safety is also a top concern for foreign students when considering higher education in the U.S. Recent incidents have fueled that fear.
Last year, I think a couple of Indians were killed in Kansas, I think. They were mistaken for Middle Easterners. And that was a big news in India, and that caused not just a bit of a diplomatic row, but also that, hey, what's happening? Are we safe? And for Sikh students, regularly get mistaken for Muslims and, are victims of hate crimes.
While the U.S. is statistically safe for students, international news coverage of such events has caused some students to think twice about studying in the U.S. Meanwhile, the U.S. government says international education remains a pillar of its economic and diplomatic efforts.
Just last year, international students contributed over $42 billion to the United States economy and supported over 450,000 United States jobs. That's pretty incredible. This two-way relationship is beneficial to our national security. The Trump administration is charting a new course for U.S. foreign policy, which includes the promotion of America's national security interests through educational and cultural exchanges.
Educators say they have stepped up efforts to recruit foreign students and assure them that they are welcome in the U.S. Kathleen Struck, VOA News, Washington.
And to tell us more about the efforts, we are joined by our education editor, Kathleen Struck. Thanks and welcome to Plugged In.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. So I wanted to drill down a little bit in the report that you were talking about. I mean, good news here, the U.S. remains the top destination, but there seems to be some troubling signs on the horizon. Has this been a trend that's been coming up in recent years, or how long are we looking at here?
So in the past decade, international students coming to the United States has just gone up and up and up. And then 2 years ago, the Institute for International Education, which measures these things, took a look and interviewed universities and colleges all over the United States and found out that students were starting to kind of push back a little bit because of the issues that we mentioned in the package. The cost of tuition is very high, not just for international students, but domestic students as well. The issue with visas and immigration, many students, international students, they want to come here and they want to stay and work for a little while. We're a country of great innovation. We have a lot more freedom than maybe some of the countries they come from. They can learn from the best here. They are the best and the brightest from their countries. So they kind of want to stay and do a little bit before they go back. And then there is the safety issue. You know, we hear about the headlines in other countries. The same thing is happening there. And then, of course, the negative political rhetoric about immigration and foreign countries.
Now, we saw in the piece the U.S. officials are pleased the U.S. remains at the top of the heap, so to speak. But, I mean, are they taking these concerns to heart and doing anything to kind of reassure international students about the environment here in the U.S.?
So, as you saw, Marie Royce, who is the Assistant Secretary of State for the Bureau of Cultural and Educational Affairs, that's the office that really reaches out throughout the whole world to bring students here. She's saying, you know, we're really taking this seriously. When I saw her speak a week ago, she said, quote, the Trump administration is charting a new course and is using educational exchange to help with diplomacy. So, you know, from what we're hearing is that is the course that they're charting. We'll have to see what happens. The political rhetoric is very negative, and a lot of students who I talk to feel unwelcome to come here. They're not sure if they're welcome, and their families aren't sure if they should send them here.
So in just a few seconds we have left, there are things that need to be done here to kind of reassure students internationally the U.S. is still a top destination.
Right. There has to be a message to these students that you are really welcome here. A lot of universities do that. There was a campaign saying you are welcome here, but they need to hear it more.
Thanks very much, Kathleen Struck. Appreciate it very much. The U.S. Department of State, in conjunction with the Institute of International Education, recently released its annual Open Doors report. The report showed that for the second year in a row, international student enrollment at U.S. colleges and universities is slowing. Despite the reported slowdown, the Trump administration has reiterated its commitment to welcoming students from around the globe. At a recent conference, Assistant Secretary of State for Educational and Cultural Affairs, Marie Royce, explained the administration's policy to maintain that edge.
The U.S. Department of State commitment is to continue our efforts to support increased international education. The number of international students in the United States has doubled over the last 16 years, proving that the United States is the consistent leader of choice for international education. It's our commitment to ensure that this remains the case. To do so, we're recruiting new partners, both education professionals and higher education institutions. These efforts on our behalf will ensure that our goal of increasing international student participation is reached in the long term. Now, we need people who can take on the toughest challenges and find solutions that keep our nation more secure and more prosperous. We want to send a message that international education should be a part of every student's academic career. The Trump administration is charting a new course for U.S. foreign policy, which includes the promotion of America's national security interests through educational and cultural exchanges. Increased student mobility and academic engagement support the 4 pillars of the national security strategy, which are protect the American people, the homeland, and the American way of life. Promote American prosperity. Preserve peace through strength. And advance American influence. The ECA Bureau and I have developed the following goals for the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, relevant to exchange programming. Goal 1, advance American foreign policy objectives through flexible, responsive programs. Goal 2, increase Americans' global competitiveness. Goal 3, counter disinformation and radicalization. Goal 4, bolster democratic principles, strengthen the rule of law, encourage strong civil society institutions. Goal 5, achieve greater efficiency through program evaluation, virtual tools, and alumni relationships.
The appeal and value of a U.S. education is something VOA's international audiences are familiar with. So we asked correspondents from our various language services for their take on what a U.S. education means in their regions.
Hi, I'm Chu Wu from Voice of America's Mandarin service. For the past 2 years, I have been visiting different universities and colleges here in the U.S. to see what is changing in education, and that's focused on China here, where I am from. With about 360,000 students, China absolutely contributes the most, and this number is still growing. Among the Chinese young people, the United States represent the best education. So if they can get into an Ivy League school here, they will take the offer with no hesitation. And there are conversations over concerns about the expensive tuition here in the U.S., and that may have changed some students' minds, but this has yet to become the situation for Chinese students because most of their families are able to afford this expense. However, the concerns are growing mostly on security issues, campus security. So whenever gun shooting happens in the U.S., it is also usually a very big news in Chinese media. So the families, the parents, they're worried what's going to happen after they send their only child to study in the U.S. How to ensure their sons and daughters' safety and stability is a question to be asked. And sometimes they decided to choose Australia or some European countries instead. This is what we know about China on U.S. higher education. I'm Chu.
I'm Tahira Kibria with Voice of America Bangla Service. There is many reasons why students are interested to come in this country. First thing is admission is very easy here. Second thing is they can choose the courses, any course they wanted to take, and they also thinking immigration process is a little bit easier after they finish their study. They can get immigration sometimes, and other option is like research also. I mean, here they can research a lot. That is also other reason. So there is various reasons they want to come in this country. When a student has American degree, they always, I mean, it is like open the world. They can go anywhere and get a good job. So that's another reason they wanted to come here and study. So money is sometimes it is not a problem. Problem is for good students even, what I mentioned before, that admission is very competitive over there. Wealthier families think this is the good way to invest to their children's future.
I'm Salim Solomon with VOA's Africa Division, where we broadcast in 17 languages. Many African students dream of studying in the United States. 9 out of every 10 prospective international students in Nigeria and South Africa list the United States as their first choice destination. But the path is not easy. Students must fulfill difficult application criteria and gather money to travel and pay for housing. Once they arrive, they sometimes have difficulty adjusting to the culture and the teaching style at U.S. universities. Now it's become more difficult for African students to obtain visas to the U.S., and they're looking elsewhere for educational opportunities. China currently hosts more African students than the U.S., and the number has grown from less than 2,000 in 2003 to 50,000 in 2015. The top countries of origin in Sub-Saharan Africa are Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana, South Africa, Cameroon, and Ethiopia. African students make a significant impact on U.S. culture and the economy. And in fact, African immigrants to the U.S. are the most educated of all immigrant groups. About 4 out of 10 adult African immigrants in the U.S. have at least a bachelor's degree. That number is higher than Americans at large. Now, back to Plugged In.
With international applications beginning to slow down at many American universities, VOA conducted an unscientific Twitter poll of over 300 participants, asking if the U.S. is still the top destination for international students. 48% of respondents stated yes, 52% said no. VOA's Mike O'Sullivan has more.
The University of California is capping enrollment of out-of-state undergraduates, including foreign students, to make more room for more Californians. But international students usually pay higher tuition fees, so this may not start a trend for public universities in other states.
And I, in fact, think it will most likely be the opposite, because as state funding for higher education continues to become tighter and tighter, and this is only within the public sector, many states are allowing their universities to find new means to recruit students, including an expanded focus on recruiting international students.
Which includes expanded overseas recruitment, already popular at many private schools. Also of concern for international students, President Trump's ban on travel from 6 majority Muslim countries. While its implementation has been blocked so far, international educators say students are watching.
Some of them did prefer to go to Canada or Australia, but still I think it's not had a big impact.
Many American universities actively recruit overseas.
In our math department, if we did not have our Asian students and instructors and graduate students, I don't think we would have a math department.
Studying in America helped a former student from India.
America has already such a big draw, so you have people from so many different parts of the world already coming here. So this is the best place to meet and make connections.
And it helps American students.
They have colleagues and peers who are from those parts of the world that they can build businesses with, start companies with, helps us to grow our footing in other markets that are really important.
Says a university advisor who came here as a student from Sudan.
This country is all about inclusion, and diversity, and that's the secret of America.
These educators agree that public universities must serve American students, but say international students enrich their institutions, and that it's just a question of finding the right balance. Mike O'Sullivan, VOA News, Los Angeles.
Well, finding the right balance is just as challenging for foreign students wishing to study here in the United States. To talk to us about some of the obstacles and hoops these students have to face, we are joined by Dr. Fanta Av from American University here in Washington. She's an educator with 25 years experience in higher learning. She's also a former president and chair at NAFSA, the Association of International Educators. And Dr. Av, thank you very much for being with us here on Plugged In today.
Thank you for the invitation.
Welcome. We've been talking about the fact the U.S. does remain a top destination, but there are some caution signs here on the horizon, a number of factors. How do you read the information that we're looking at from the various recent surveys?
Sure. So I do think that it is the case that the U.S. remains for most of students around the world as a destination of choice for a lot of factors. One, because of the quality of the education system, the fact that there's so much diversity in terms of the types of colleges and universities that students are able to come to, and also the fact that this is really about experiential education, that it is putting theory to practice. But there are cautionary signs, as you've said, and the most recent Open Doors IIE reports point to that cautionary sign, the slow growth that we've seen in new students coming to the U.S.
Right.
And there are multiple factors to it. First and foremost is really, I do think, the cost of higher education in the U.S. is of concerns to middle class and upper middle class families around the world. The second is the current political climate. We keep hearing from folks around the world that the current political climate is sending a chilling effect around the world, and that international students are not as sure anymore that this is a place that is not only welcoming, but a place that is open to immigrants.
Let me interrupt at this point and ask, are educators taking these factors into account? Are they doing anything to try to reassure international students looking at the U.S. as a possible destination?
I would say yes. It is the case that as international educators, we've always been aware of the fact that international education and mobility is volatile, and that it is premised on political, economic, and social conditions in different environments. And it is the case that educators and universities are becoming much more focused on what are the reasons for why students perhaps may no longer be looking at the U.S. So there's heavy emphasis on recruitment, but that recruitment is not enough. You have to have support services that are adequate for international students. Right. So a lot of universities are really investing in making sure that international students coming to our institutions really are coming in understanding that there's this range of support services.
What is the competition landscape around the world? I mean, there are other nations now making a bid for these students.
I would say the competition is fierce and it's real. It has been the case that over a period of time, more and more countries have really seen the benefits of having international students in their respective countries. And the benefits are numerous. Just alone in terms of public diplomacy, we've always known that international education is a really major part of public diplomacy. But it's also not a secret that there's also economic reasons why nation states seek international students, in addition to the fact that this is an incredibly important way for many countries to build their human capital. And so these students are some of the best and brightest. They contribute to immense innovation. Whether you think about technology innovation, you think about entrepreneurship, you think about setting up businesses, sciences, and discovery, international students have been incredible contributors to those areas and those fields.
Yeah, I just wanted to conclude in the 20 seconds or so we have left about the benefits to the United States of international students coming here. It's hard to measure, isn't it?
It is, and it's something that I don't think we can take for granted. There is a lot of research that's been done about the number of international students who have contributed to startups. Whether you look at Google, you look at eBay, international students have been part of the stories of those innovations. Whether you think about scientific discovery and the number of Nobel laureates, many of them have been former international students themselves.
Well, Dr. Fanta of American University, thank you so much for joining us today on Plugged In.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
As the cost of higher education continues to rise in the U.S., many American students must rely on financial aid to pay for tuition. Businessman Michael Bloomberg recently announced a $1.8 billion donation to Johns Hopkins University, a private institution, to help students pay for tuition. Despite this record-setting donation, the percentage of financial aid funds for international students at the university will remain unchanged at about 10%. But most U.S. states have programs aimed at bringing students from abroad to their public colleges and universities. The reason is quite simple. Those students are good for the local economy. Valikia Newsom has more.
It's a $42 billion industry in the United States, supporting nearly 500,000 jobs. While enrollments continue to grow, competition from other countries is growing. The reasons can vary, from the current political mood to the perceived dangers associated with being a gun-friendly nation. But researchers say a major factor is cost. Over the past 30 years, college tuition costs for public institutions have grown more than 200% and as much as 130% for private institutions. Despite the high costs, international students continue to flock to the U.S. Although the pace appears to have slowed in the past 2 years, more than 1 million students come to the U.S. every year for the opportunity to graduate from a prominent university. Nearly half of all students come from China and India, two of the fastest-growing economies in the world. The world's second top destination for international students is Great Britain, followed by France, but new data suggests Australia and Canada are becoming increasingly competitive as the cost of a world-class education continues to rise.
So what's it like coming to the U.S. to study? Well, to get some answers to that, VOA took its cameras to Houston, Texas, to hear from some international students at Rice University.
Well, in orientation, I have found information that will be really important for me.
They're helping us go through all the health insurances and immigration stuff. So, I mean, it's useful to me.
But there were many important helpful tips.
I think the Office of International Student Services really showed that there's a lot to learn. Even if you've been living in the United States for a while, I've learned a ton from the orientation, the resources that are on campus, how I can make use of the resources, and just how to adjust to this new intellectual environment.
I had to take into account different aspects, such as weather. I don't like cold weather.
It's very hot, very humid. I'm from the north. I was born in the north, so it's a drastic change.
Of course, family and friends are a big deal, and you always miss them. But one thing that I miss the most, and that's kind of like my recurrent topic every time I meet a new person, is the weather.
Houston, I had heard a lot of great things about Houston. I had not been to this part of the country, specifically Texas, so it was an exciting new challenge.
I never knew that I'm coming to Texas. Yeah, here I am.
I encourage everyone who is considering coming to the States to pursue graduate education to give it a try. The international component of the programs is one of the main strengths of this country. They do want to have you here. They do want to have international students and American students. They want to get in touch with you. They want to meet you, and that's really cool. And I know it's expensive, but if you're smart and you work hard, you can get a scholarship, and you might end up here like me without paying not even for your flight. So just go for it.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Stay plugged in by liking us on Facebook at Voice of America. You can also like Greta's Facebook page at facebook.com/Greta, and follow her on Twitter at Greta. Thanks as always for watching and for being plugged in.
Especially for international relations, studying in the United States with the expertise and organizations based here would give me better career prospects and a better understanding of my field than studying back in Japan.
Well, the thing is, I'm doing journalism, so like DC is like an amazing place to do it because it's like the political district. Like East Coast, like the only thing that exists, like we always talk about it, is like New York and DC, and New York is like this economic district, and like you have like DC, which is like a political district. So like I thought this would be like the best place to do it, I guess. So like I chose Australia because it was like closest, I guess, to me, but like I really like the States. If you ask me for a second choice, I would guess like maybe like UK, because I was actually thinking of doing a degree in English, like English major, but like I don't know, I've been to the States before and I just absolutely had like the best time of my life.
I'm a student athlete here, and I chose to come to America because I can combine sports and higher education, which I can't do back home.
Back in my country, I can only learn things from the news, from like a reference told me, but right here I can totally get the first season.